Hello, welcome to STH English. American President Donald Trump has jacked up the number of aircraft that India lost in its war against Pakistan. It started with 6 plus 2. 6 were shot down, 2 probably were affected. He went up to 7, which were shot down, and now it is officially 8. The surprising thing is not that Donald Trump keeps on adjusting the number upwards. The surprising thing is that India refuses to respond to this new information that comes out of Trump's mouth every time he puts it out. Uh, Generally speaking, Narendra Modi and his hyperactive account should have responded to this, but Modi has chosen a strategic silence every time Trump talks about how many aircraft did India lose. So officially now, as far as the American president is concerned, the number of aircraft that were shot down is 8. Should Pakistan and US ties be held hostage to the narrative around the aircraft down by Pakistan only? No. Pakistan and US ties need to be seen in a holistic way, in a 3D analysis. So what would be this 3D analysis? Well, the 3D analysis would be to ask all the relevant questions with regard to where Pakistan and US ties stand. So question number one would be, let's take the military and the strategic side of it. For instance, what does the US want as far as Pakistan is concerned with regard to Iran? The answer to that, based on our conversations in Islamabad and elsewhere, is that the US essentially wants Pakistan to facilitate a direct dial between Iran and the US. And there are no conditions attached to Pakistan playing this role. It's not as if that, if you do this, this will happen. But there is an expectation that if you have a strategic influence with Iran, use that influence and get the two countries to talk to each other. And remember, this is a bypass that has been created apart from the general pathway that US has been using with regard to engagement with Iran via the Middle East. So it is not the Middle Eastern path of engaging with Iran, it is the South Asia part that Washington is using to engage Iran. Iran seems to be pretty open to it. So with regard to Iran, nothing more, nothing less. What does it want with regard to India? This is a tough one because the US does have a strategic relationship with India, whose depth and width is measured by the number of years spent, the number of investments made, the lobbying network that has been created. But right now, the Trump administration seems to be creating a delicate dance or a balancing act for itself. On the one hand, it doesn't want to let go of India. On the other hand, it doesn't want to hyphenate its ties with India to the extent that it has to de-hyphenate its ties with Pakistan. So what is happening here is that the Americans are creating space for themselves in engagement with Pakistan, and they call Pakistan a net stabilizer as far as regional security is concerned. This is the kind of talk that India doesn't like to hear because it wants to paint Pakistan in all the negative color. But the US seems to be moving away from the Indian narrative and trying to create some sort of a deep engagement with Pakistan. This means that the US will be open to investments in Pakistan. US will be open to utilizing Pakistan's strategic importance for them. And Pakistan will be open to allowing US to build these ties and also respond to them in a positive way. At the same time balancing its own ties with China. So with regard to India, it's not an either-or situation. The Trump administration has created a new space with regard to Pakistan's link with Washington. At the same time, without compromising its core value with Delhi. Whether it'll stay this way remains to be seen. Another conflict might erupt and Washington might have to pick and choose. But for now, that's where it is going. Let's move to the next one. What does it want with regard to China? China is a very complex factor, but for now, America seems to have understood that just as its ties with India are not going to be a hurdle in its ties with Pakistan, Pakistan also wants to tell Washington that its ties with Washington should not be a hurdle in developing its ties with China. So U.S. seems to have um, come to terms with the fact that Pakistan-China ties will also be there. But the complexity is that when it comes to bringing in investments and bringing in technology, the Chinese and the Americans seem to have the same kind of problem, which is the Americans think that sharing technology and doing joint ventures with Pakistan would necessarily open their technology to manipulation, even theft, as they say, by the Chinese. Chinese, by the way, have the same concern that if we share a lot of technology with Pakistan, the American companies moving next door and staying next door might be able to manipulate that data. So there is this, tension, just to give you one example, and Pakistan is at the center of it. But both countries, Beijing and Washington, seem to now realize that there is value in engaging with Pakistan, and Washington seems to be, digesting the fact that Pakistan-China relationship are going to be there. It's a constant, so it will have to develop its ties with Pakistan in spite of its ties with China. So that's where China, India, and Iran exist. Afghanistan is a very interesting case in point. We're told that America understands, and this is an important one, America understands Pakistan's legitimate right to defend itself against cross-border terrorism. The general principle is that you should talk it out, but the strategic principle, the military principle, is also understood well by Washington. So Washington that way has absolutely no problem in Pakistan dealing with the cross-border terrorism in its own way. Washington denies the charge that it has flown drones from Pakistan and hit targets inside Afghanistan, therefore confirming that whatever has happened cross-border in the last couple of weeks and months is purely driven by Pakistan's own technology and its own policy. Washington is still evaluating its ties with the Taliban, not really treating them as a legitimate government, but at the same time mapping how Beijing reacts to the Taliban, how the Russians engage with the Taliban, and what is their need out there. But their policies seem to be evolving. A couple of things have already happened with regard to Afghanistan, and that's where Pakistan becomes very important. President Trump's desire to get the Bagram base is articulated. It's out there on the table. President Trump's stated policy of getting the equipment back from the Taliban that were left behind in what he calls hasty retreat from Afghanistan under Biden. The president also wants this area to be stabilized so that trade corridors could open up and energy corridors could open up. And at the same time, if you are moving in a big way in Balochistan, in KP, in search for rare earth minerals and other investments, you need to have this entire belt becoming stable. And if Taliban and their association with terrorist groups is destabilizing this belt, obviously this is going to be a direct, clear and present danger to the American investments and interests inside Pakistan. So in a way, while the Trump administration is evolving its policy with regard to Afghanistan, some of the parameters of the policy are already in place. And in all parameters, Pakistan plays a central role. So whichever way you look at it, whether it is China, India, Iran, Afghanistan, all around the combination of factors have brought Washington and Islamabad together. And one last thing, which probably is the most important thing with regard to Pakistan and US ties, is the Trump factor. And on this side, the Asim factor. The reading in Islamabad about this equation is that obviously Donald Trump has driven most of the project, whether it is rare earth minerals, whether it is Pakistan's role in the Middle East, where, by the way, Pakistan is not expected to really bear the heaviest cross, but just to be a facilitator and a helper and a good sport, and a country that is willing to put out its resources, whether it is HR or technological resources, to help stabilize the Gaza area. Nothing beyond that. So whether it is the Middle East or it is South Asia or it is rare earth minerals or his constant praise of General Asim Munir, my favorite field marshal, Trump has put his own stamp on the ties with Pakistan. Same goes for Pakistan as well. Individuals stand out, while the Prime Minister seemed to be taking the procedural lead in engaging with Washington. It is General Asim Munir who is the man that Washington engages with and who's the one who's driving this relationship. So the reading in Islamabad is that while heavy personalities are involved in pulling Pakistan-US ties in a positive direction, the attempt also is to look beyond these personalities, build a base of relationship that can survive the Trump factor getting minused in the next couple of years, and possibly changes taking place in Pakistan as well in the next decade or so. So the attempt to use the personality factor to cement ties and eventually to depersonalize them and institutionalize them is what seems to be at work here when you talk about Pakistan-US ties. It's a complex one. We have been down this road before. We have tried to build ties which go beyond personalities, go beyond individuals, and there were sectoral engagements, and the depth was measured by the level of engagement. But in the end, when that phase passed, the ties kind of fizzled out. So there's a new attempt that is being made to use this push by Trump and push by General Asim Munir to bind these two countries together while they preserve and protect their own interests, and then see if these ties could be grounded in long-term durable interests. It's a big one. As I said, we have been down this road before. We hit a snag every decade or so. But this time around, they think that they have a dynamic going that goes beyond Trump and that goes beyond Pakistan's current leadership. And if this works out, probably Pakistan and US ties will be stable for a long time to come. But that's a forecast nobody should be betting on because it can turn either way.